This is the story of how my husband took advantage of my going on frequent business trips by bringing another woman into our home. Mommy, please don't come home today. I can't believe I'm letting my little girl say this to me. I can't allow you to do this to my darling little girl. I decided to collude with a certain someone, and I vowed to take revenge on my husband. My name is Magdalena, also known as Maggie, and I'm 48 years old. After graduating from college, I was offered a job in a local company of my hometown, and as of now, I work for City Hall. I met my husband due to a friend of mine who introduced us out of concern for how much of a workaholic I was. Admittedly, a job was perhaps the only thing I initially planned to have. I never planned to have a husband, nor a child. But perhaps fate had other plans. Because soon, after we were introduced, Walter and I had our first date at a stylish cafe. I arrived 30 minutes earlier than the time we were supposed to meet, and I decided to wait for him with a cup of coffee. As evident by the fact that I mentioned we were already introduced, I'd already met the guy, but I wondered what kind of person Mr. Walter Busby was in private. I hoped he was a kind person. While I was thinking that to myself, a man came into the cafe, completely out of breath. He was coming straight toward me.
Are you Miss Magdalena?
Yes, I am. I was frankly a little puzzled because of his sudden appearance, but he responded with a smile.
Nice to see you again. I'm Walter.
It's nice to see you again. Thank you for taking some time today. Perhaps I stood up a bit too hurriedly because he giggled in amusement.
Oh, this is, I do beg your pardon. It was just a very, polite greeting from you, and I have to admit it was kind of cute.
He said as he smiled and took a seat. He then went on to order the same coffee as I did. My first impression of Walter was that he was of handsome appearance, with a very calm, very reassuring nature. I do admit I fell in love with him at first sight. There was just one thing that bothered me. May I ask you why you were stammering when you started talking to me, Mr. Busby? Walter went on to tell me, with a hint of embarrassment on his face.
Actually, I've seen photographs of you because of our mutual friend, and honestly, you were the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen, and now that you're in front of me, well, I couldn't help but be very nervous the first time we met, and when I saw you here, I hope I haven't made you uncomfortable.
As he said so, his agitated gaze, which flew around the room instead of focusing on me, now did focus on me.
I fell in love with you at first sight, you see. And my heart was pounding when I saw you, there in the cafe, drinking your coffee. If I was breathless, it wasn't because I was running. I sound cheesy, I know, but I'm trying to be honest with you. I love you. Will you do me the honor of becoming mine? I would be so happy, you see.
While a part of me was genuinely surprised by his sudden confession, a better part of me was overflowing with happiness. When I first met you, Mr. Busby, I thought you were a little strange, I'll be honest. But now that I've met you and talked with you a little, I must confess, I'm in love with you too. I know I would be so happy too if I became yours. Thank you so much. And that was how we started going out, and we went on many dates. 3 years later, we got married. Soon after our marriage, we were blessed with a child. We were supposed to be at the peak of our happiness at this point, but after our daughter Lily was born, my husband's behavior started to change, little by little. Walter works as a gym instructor, and he is always careful about what he eats. But since our daughter was born, I've been really busy with the childcare, and taking the time to take care of his meals had become a lot more difficult for me. Soon, he started to complain about anything and everything.
I'm so jealous of you, you know that. You get paid for maternity leave and get 3 meals a day with a nap included. And you're cooking my meals too. Man, I wish they had some kind of easygoing status like that for us puny little men bound to the workforce.
I can't believe you think that way. Honey, trying to raise my newborn daughter is far from easy too, you know? And I'm also doing my best to take care of the house while you're at work. We argued like this every day once upon a time. By the time my daughter was in elementary school, we'd pretty much become a couple that didn't interfere with each other whatsoever. My husband had the same charisma as that of the air that filled the living room. And while it did pain me to say this, paying attention to him had become a very hard thing to do. Such was our relationship, but he nonetheless loved our daughter very much. She was the sole reason we were still a family.
Hey, Lily. How's school these days, darling?
It's fun to study, Daddy. And I have a lot of friends at school.
Oh yeah, I completely forgot. You're going on a school trip starting tomorrow, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. You better look forward to seeing your souvenirs, Daddy. Her smile was one of pure joy and love once he heard that. But while my daughter was on her school trip, for some reason, he hardly ever comes home. Any sensible wife would wonder why. Why don't you ever come home anymore? When I asked him that, all he ever responded with was,
It's work. Nothing I can do about that now, can I?
My distrust towards my husband only grew with time. A few days later, I decided to take his clothes to the cleaners, and before I left for the cleaners, I went through all his pockets. That's when I found a small piece of folded paper. I unfolded it and discovered that it was a receipt from a certain inn. The reservation was for 2 people. My daughter was on a school trip, so that could only mean one thing. He had gone on an overnight affair with another woman while his daughter was away elsewhere. But at that time, I wasn't sure if my husband was cheating on me, so I decided against pursuing the matter by interrogating Walter. One day, my boss ordered me to go on an urgent business trip. I'm really sorry, Lily, sweetheart. Mommy has to go on an important business trip, and I won't be home for about 3 days. My daughter looks away, undoubtedly sad when she heard that. Daddy's also going to be busy with work that day, so how about going over to Grandma's place overnight? Would you like that, darling? Her face lighting up immediately was more than enough as an answer. I want to visit my grandma, Mommy. She has a big house, and there are rice paddies and gardens too. I love my grandma's house, and I want to go. My parents-in-law are vegetable farmers, and my daughter has always loved to help them harvest the vegetables, ever since she was a little girl. But because my husband, who hated insects, was not very good at harvesting himself, it was unfortunately rare to take our daughter to pay a visit to my parents-in-law. On the day of my business trip, Mrs. Busby, my mother-in-law, came to pick up my daughter. I'm so sorry I must impose your hospitality at such a busy time for you, Mrs. Busby. I only wish I wasn't so busy myself. Oh, don't worry about that, dear. Whenever our darling granddaughter comes to visit, she always brightens up our house. You're always welcome here, my dears. Yay! I love you, Grandma. Lily gets tickled pink upon hearing that. Most adorable sight I ever witnessed. Well, I'll see you in 3 days. I'll remind you to drive her back home if that isn't too much of a burden for you, Mrs. Busby. Thank you so much for your help. With that as my parting shot, I hugged my daughter, shouldered her luggage into Mrs. Busby's car, and waved them away before driving to the neighboring city where my business trip was. On the evening of the second day of my business trip, after I finished a good day's work, I was driving home when I received a call on my cell phone from my mother-in-law. I answered the phone and was greeted by my daughter's voice. It seemed that Lily had borrowed her grandmother's cell phone and called me. Hi, Mommy! We are almost home. Wait, what? Mommy's still on a business trip right now, honey. I'm supposed to be home tomorrow. Oh, really? Oopsie daisies. I'll ask Grandma. Wait a moment, madam. I giggled at that last part because she sounded exactly like a telemarketer. I then overheard her telling Mrs. Busby that I would be coming back tomorrow and not today. Then Mrs. Busby's sweet voice resonated in my ear. Oh dear, I've made a mistake, haven't I? I'm so sorry, my dear. And what should we do about Lily? Oh, Mrs. Busby, don't worry. To be honest with you, work went really smoothly this whole trip, and I'm actually on my way home right now. Oh, now that is music to my ears, my dear. I'll let Lily take the phone again, okay? She passed the phone back to Lily. Mommy, you're coming home, right? Yay! As my daughter and I continued to have a conversation, I decided to hurry on home. Mrs. Busby had pulled into the parking lot near our apartment, and I could hear them walking towards home. Hey, Mommy, what's for dinner tonight? I'm thinking of making your favorite, sweetheart, hamburgers. Her voice became so loud with excitement. That's literally the most angelic sound to hear as a mother. Your own child's squeal of excitement. Wouldn't you agree? While we were talking like that, I could tell they'd gotten home safe and sound because I could hear the sound of my front door opening. Okay, Mommy, we're home now. Wait, hold on. And then Lily went on to ask me a very strange question. Mommy, are you home already? Cocking an eyebrow, I responded by telling her I was still in the car on my way home. By this point, Mrs. Busby had immediately understood everything that was going on because she said loud enough that I could hear that there was a pair of women's shoes on the front porch. She also claimed she could hear a woman's voice coming from the end of the hallway. What my mother-in-law did next was very quick. She took her granddaughter back to the car, which she used to bring her home. Lily, my darling, listen to Grandma very carefully, okay? I'm going to go back to your house, and you're gonna stay in the car and keep on talking on the phone with your mommy, okay? After she told her that, she closed the door and locked the car. I can only assume she went back to the house. Everything I'm about to tell you is what Mrs. Busby experienced, and what she told me right after she left Lily in the car. So, after climbing back up the stairs to Walter's apartment, where he lived with me, she quietly opened the front door. She quietly made for the place where she'd heard the woman's voice. It was none other than the bathroom, and from there she could unmistakably hear the voices of a woman and her son, Walter. From what she could hear, it seemed they were taking a bath together. Are you sure we can do this? Just because your wife is away on a business trip doesn't mean she won't find out.
Everything will be okay, darling. I'm divorcing her anyway, remember?
That's true. I can't wait to marry you, Walter, my darling. I love you so much. After hearing their conversation, Mrs. Busby was completely convinced that her own son was cheating on me, his wife. She quietly left the scene behind and returned to the car where her granddaughter was waiting. Lily seemed to actually realize what was going on because of her grandmother's behavior. Mommy, please don't come home today. What's wrong with you all of a sudden? Lily, darling, please tell me what's going on. Right at that moment, Mrs. Busby, with uncanny timing, asked Lily to give her the phone. Oh, Maggie, my dear. I'm so sorry. She then told me everything she just witnessed in my home. Oh, my dear Mrs. Busby, this is not something you should apologize for. You did nothing wrong, at all. I'm almost there. I'm only a few minutes away. If you could wait for a short while, we can sort this out together. I told her that, cut the line, and rushed to the place where I thought my daughter and mother-in-law were. Not 10 minutes later, I met up with the two of them. I'm home. Lily, darling. Mommy, welcome home. I have a favor to ask of you, sweetheart. Think you can do something for Mommy? After saying that, I told my daughter that she should wait for me at the house in the neighborhood that belonged to a friend of hers from school. She seemed to realize something because she seemed to force a smile as she replied, "Yeah. Okay, Mommy, I'll go there." It was a painful sight to see Lily with a facial expression like that. "I'm so sorry, darling." And so, we walked on, hand in hand, toward her friend's house. When we arrived, I explained the situation to Mrs. Frisk, the mother of Lily's friend, Gabriella, and a personal friend of my own. Before I left for my apartment, Lily said, "Mommy, please pick me up as soon as you can, okay?" I smiled, kissed her, and waved at her as I walked back toward our apartment building. My mother-in-law and I approached the apartment where my husband was having an affair with a woman. "Mrs. Busby, I cannot thank you enough." She was surprised by what I said. "When you entered the house with Lily, you found out about Walter's affair, did you not? But in order to not get Lily involved, you quickly took action and awaited my return. It was probably a very dangerous moment for Lily, and I felt I must deeply thank you for doing your best to protect her." In response, Mrs. Busby seemed to find it hard to meet my eyes, and she was about to cry. "Perhaps I did do what I thought was right, but at the end of the day, all I ever did was give you and darling Lily a very hard time. I cannot tell you how sorry I am." She bowed her head deeply as she tearfully apologized to me. "Oh, my dear Mrs. Busby, I'm absolutely fine." As I tell her so, I bring out the receipt from the inn that I'd found a few days earlier. I told her how I'd found the piece of paper inside the pocket of one of my husband's suits, and I told her that I suspected him of cheating on me ever since. "So, Walter was having an affair for quite a long time, it would seem. So the woman I discovered in your apartment today, I wonder if she's the one he was having the affair with when he went to that inn." "I'm thinking it was. I'm going to ask Walter to explain everything to me, including the receipt. And we were also going to uncover the relationship between Walter and this anonymous woman once and for all. In order to capture evidence, I turned on the camera of my cell phone and began recording a video. We quietly went inside the house. It was quiet, perhaps too quiet. My mother-in-law and I quietly opened the bedroom door, and lo and behold, we discover Walter, sound asleep next to an unfamiliar woman, sleeping peacefully on his chest. We took a couple more soundless steps inside before Mrs. Busby hollered, "Walter, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Even I jolted explosively at the sheer volume of her voice. She quickly wakes them up.
What are you doing here, Mum? And you, Maggie, you're supposed to be on a business trip, aren't you?
Walter was completely puzzled. The woman quickly slipped under the covers without saying a word. "You two need to give in. It's no use making up excuses." Mrs. Busby's sweet voice was nowhere to be found, and she ripped the bedsheets off the woman. I was quick to capture the scene on video. "Why the hell are you taking videos for? I'm going to sue you for defamation." The woman screamed as her lover beside her desperately tried to put on his underwear. I was so disgusted by this indescribable scene that I felt like throwing up right then and there. I tell them, "Both of you, once you put some decent clothes on, you can sit right here," as I point to the floor. "Hell no, bitch!" Mrs. Busby snapped. "I don't give a good goddamn what you want to do. You are going to sit down right here." The fury and fierceness in her voice eventually pushed the stubborn, unwilling, unfaithful woman to obey my instructions. "You, who the frick is this woman?"
I just met her today, you see.
As my husband started making up excuses, the woman snaps at him. What the hell? What are you talking about? We've been together for a year now, haven't we? Just after she said that, she started bragging about her love story with my idiot husband. Walter and I have been dating on the premise of marriage. We even took a trip to celebrate our 1-year anniversary last month. You see? The woman continued as she embraced her lover's arm. You and Walter better get a divorce soon. I suppose you do understand that if you don't divorce my darling, we can't get married, right? Hearing these words, my husband's face grows deathly pale.
Maggie, listen to me. That was just a joke. Don't take it seriously.
I'm not kidding. You said you'd marry me. You said you would, time and time again. Walter shoulders away from the woman's grasp and begins to plead desperately.
The only woman I love, the only woman I've ever loved is you, Maggie. Please believe me.
As he said so, he gets down on his knees. I didn't feel a single thing when I saw him in this vulnerable state, and I was in a state of calm so complete that I even surprised myself. You are so damn disgusting. The air in the room got drastically colder with those 5 words. Listen up, Mr. Busby. I'm going to give this woman what she wants, and I'm going to divorce you. Try to get that through that blockhead of yours. What exactly am I so angry about?
You say you're angry because I cheated on you, right? Yeah. Okay, I cheated on you, so what? It's all your fault, since you were never an attractive woman to begin with. Why don't you reflect on that, eh?
I can't believe I'm hearing these words of his, especially at this time. I glared at my husband with disdain. Answer me this. Why do you think your mother is here?
Because she was taking care of Lily while you were away on a business trip.
As he was saying that, he seemed to have realized something. His tone turned into one of panic.
Don't tell me you brought Lily come back to this house, Mum.
Mrs. Busby, with her arms crossed, answered with the cold, hard truth. Yeah, I did. I made a genuine mistake, and I thought Maggie had instructed me to drop Lily off at her home today. And right as we walked in through the front door, we uncovered the truth about you. You goddamn bastard! Mrs. Busby was just about to raise her hand, as if to slap her son, but I stopped her and calmed her down. Oh, Mrs. Busby, it's all right now. I decided to tell my husband on behalf of my mother-in-law. Thanks to your mother's uncanny tactfulness, your daughter never saw you having an affair with this woman. Walter was visibly relieved, and I continued. Lily is now in the care of a friend of mine from her school.
If Lily doesn't know anything, we can still start over, can't we? Please. Please.
This particular conversation aroused heavy breathing on the part of the woman. She interrupts by saying, The hell you mean? We can still start over. What about our marriage? What about all the children you promised you would give me? And what about our amazing life together we dreamed of? With a disgusted look on my face, I tell the woman, Oh, don't worry, we're getting a divorce. But honestly, I think you should be more worried about the alimony you're going to have to pay me. And why the hell should I have to pay anything to the likes of you? She started throwing a stupid tantrum right then and there, and Mrs. Busby forcefully grabbed her by the arm and literally dragged her out of the room. My husband followed her out as though he was chasing after her. I then went back to where my daughter was right after this interaction. She rushed to answer the door as soon as I pressed the doorbell. Sorry to have kept you waiting, darling. Shall we go home then? Yes, please. I thanked Mrs. Frisk numerous times for taking care of her while I did what I had to do. We then left their house, but I didn't want to go back to that apartment, the very same that Walter had used to cheat on me with. I decided to stay in a hotel for a while with my daughter. After a while, my husband and I got divorced without a hitch, and he now pays me child support. As for the alimony, because he'd hurt my daughter, I demanded a larger amount than what was deemed conventional. At first, he refused to pay the alimony, but out of guilt for his daughter, he reluctantly decided to pay after all. After that, the woman whom he had an affair with stormed his workplace.
Walter, what the hell are you doing? Stupid! Why are you paying such a large sum of money to that bitch of an ex-wife of yours? What are you going to do with your marriage to me, huh?
That's what she shouted, and it caused a commotion. This caused Walter's job to find out that he divorced his wife because of an act of adultery. The gym had always sold a clean image, and the fact that he had caused its reputation to be called into question made the executives furious. Walter was fired on the spot. Of course, there was more to it than that. The woman, whose name ironically turned out to be Patience, illegally brushed past security guards and broke into her husband's workplace without proper clearance. She was taken in for questioning by the police under alleged suspicion of trespassing. As a result of this, she was also fired from her job as a full-time pastry chef at a local restaurant. I heard. Well, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not even going to lose a single penny of the compensation. As for Walter, in order to pay the great amount of child support and alimony, he decided to go back to his parents' house to devote himself to his family's vegetable farm, which was actually a very good business. Although he's the heir to inherit the family business, he is still an amateur in farming. Knowledge and experience. And Mrs. Busby tells me jokingly that he is being given a hard time by the more experienced workers, who are all younger than him themselves. My parents-in-law admitted they were relieved that their heir has returned, regardless of the reason why he did it.
Don't let your darling Lily be ashamed of her own father, son.
That is what Walter hears every day as he frantically tries to keep up with farming work and learn how to run the business smoothly. My relationship with my parents-in-law still continues, and my daughter keeps in touch with them through letters and text messages. We still meet at least once a year for dinner, and we catch up on what's going on with each other. However, my ex-husband is not allowed to attend these dinners, as per his own daughter's request. My daughter loved her father very much, once upon a time, and she's not willing to forgive him for his betrayal just yet. The reality is that she has lost her father, but I promised myself that I would raise her with all the loving care she deserves in the world. I vow to provide her with everything she'll ever need to grow into a beautiful, compassionate, independent woman.